Good morning, beautiful people. Welcome back to Brewing Jitsu. We don't need to rehash what 2020 was like, but I hope that you and yours are healthy and safe. It's been a minute since the last video, but with most people in some form of quarantine restrictions, a lot more people are getting interested in switching from buying their coffee on their way to work at whatever was most convenient to leveling up their coffee game at home. I'm starting to get questions. How do I get something that's just gonna kickstart my day and launch me into whatever is in store? The classic specialty coffee home brewing method is typically a pour over, something like the V60, the Kalita, or the Chemex. Now, most pour overs work in generally the same way. Your ground coffee sits in the top, separated from your brewing vessel by a filter, usually paper or metal. Hot water is then distributed over the bed of coffee, flowing through the coffee grounds into the vessel at the bottom, aided by the action of gravity alone. The variations in pour-over devices come from the shape of the vessel at the top, the thickness and quality and material of the filter, and in the amount that flow is allowed to move from the brewing device into the brewing vessel. Now, there are tons of pour-over devices out there on the market. Last video, we reviewed the Fellow Stag XF dripper. I can think of the Phoenix by St. Anthony's Industries, the Origami dripper, the Melita or the Bee, but all of them share the same general principle, and that is they're relatively unforgiving. You could find a V60 on Amazon for $10 to $15. A grinder that's gonna stand up to a pour-over method gets much more expensive. Your typical coffee grinder has a spinning blade on the inside, just like a blender or a food processor. If you took coffee, ground in a typical blade grinder, and spread it out on a napkin, you're gonna see a huge range of particle size. On one end of the spectrum, you're gonna have a lot of finely ground coffee dust. This dust chokes a pour-over filter and prevents the water from drawing down through the coffee bed, extracting a lot of bitter flavors into the final coffee. On the other side, you'll see a lot of big chunks of incompletely ground coffee beans. These boulders don't provide enough resistance to flow for water to move through the coffee bed, giving you extractions that are too quick and a coffee that tastes a little bit too sour and too thin compared to the rich, full, delicious cup of coffee that you're used to drinking. For that reason, most people who are using a pour-over are going to have a high-quality burr grinder, something that is crushing coffee beans to a much narrower range of particle size, rather than chopping it all up and hoping that you get the right size of coffee ground. Unfortunately, most burr grinders cost far more than the pour-over devices that they're paired with. A decent manual burr grinder starts at around $50 to $60, and a decent electric burr grinder starts at around the $100 price range. This is why pour-overs tend to be a little bit more of an investment than you might initially think. These barriers to entry are why I think pour-overs are not the most beginner-friendly approach to brewing coffee at home. Hot take, the Clever, with this completely different approach to coffee brewing, might be the ultimate starter coffee device. This video was not sponsored by Clever in any way, shape, or form. This device was a gift to me from work through Secret Santa. Any of the stuff that I'm talking about today, including the gear that I'm shooting with, you can find through Amazon affiliate links in the description below. What comes inside the box is pretty straightforward. You get the Clever device itself with a lid that goes on the top, a drip tray, and a pack of Clever branded filters. These are a standard filter size that you can find under the Melita brand name, Melita number 4, in most grocery stores. Now, I'm not going to spend any time talking about paper thickness, geometry, or shape of the filter because I think it's less relevant to the Clever dripper. But the fact that you can buy these filters in most supermarkets makes the Clever that much easier to use on a daily basis. The Clever is an immersion brew device, more analogous to a French press than it is to a pour-over. There is a valve in the bottom that holds all of the liquid in the top with the coffee grounds until the Clever is placed on top of a brew device, allowing water to run out into your vessel. Functionally, the way the Clever works, filter goes in, preheating water goes in. The valve at the bottom prevents that preheating water from coming out until you are ready, making it much easier than something like the V60 to get your device up to brewing temperature. After you've drained your preheating water, coffee grounds go in and all of your brew water goes in at once. And then after about 2.5 to 3 minutes, I place the clever directly on top of my mug, allowing the coffee to drain through the filter. With the clever, the extraction is much more dependent on how long you're steeping compared to the evenness of your grind. This makes the clever a lot more forgiving than a traditional pour-over and a lot more controllable. I would argue that the clever gets you started brewing amazing coffee at home with nothing more than an ordinary kettle and a stopwatch. A couple of quick practical limitations of the clever: it holds a maximum of 550 milliliters, maybe 600 if you're really pushing it. And that means that it might not be quite enough, especially if you're brewing for 2 people on a regular basis. Also, the bottom of the clever is very thoughtfully designed with these plastic struts that form an X. This means that you could put the clever on top of almost any size device. I probably wouldn't recommend putting this on top of something with an opening that was narrower than about an inch or 25 millimeters across. So let's have a coffee shootout between the clever dripper and my daily driver morning pour over, the steel Kalita 185 Wave. We'll brew them side by side with the exact same coffee and the exact same grind settings to see what impact these 2 different brew devices have on the final cup. Today we're drinking a Colombian coffee grown by Nelson Chavez, roasted by Metric Coffee here in the city. Link in the description for this exact coffee. Support your local roasters. I ground this at an 18 on my Baratza Encore, and we're doing 16 grams each at about a 1 to 16.5 ratio. To agitate the coffee grounds and the water together, and put my lid on to keep it at temperature. One moment while I clean up some coffee grounds. All right, I've got the clever on this side and the Kalita on this side. Got my coffee cupping spoon from Black and White Coffee Roasters and just some hot water in here to rinse in my Absento coffee mug. While we wait for these to cool down, I know this is totally non-scientific. It's completely unblinded. I know which coffee is which. Ideally, you'd probably want to dial in each coffee's grind setting to the specific brew method. This is more of an experiment to see what sort of differences you might expect brewing in 2 very different brewing methods. For those who haven't seen coffee cupping before, I have a whole video on why you would think about drinking coffee with a spoon. 99% of the time, I'm not drinking coffee this way. But if you're looking to get really into the details, you'll learn about what you like to drink, helps you develop better skills at brewing your coffee, picking your coffee. Let's go ahead and taste. On first taste, I am pretty sure I over-extracted in the Kalita. There's a little bit of bitterness and it lacks a little bit of the sweetness that I'm getting out of the clever itself. The clever has a nice fullness to it, a little bit more astringency. Both of these are very drinkable cups of coffee, but putting them side by side, I would prefer drinking the clever over the Kalita. Final thoughts: putting these 2 side by side, the clever absolutely produced a better tasting cup than the Kalita. The grind size probably needs to be adjusted and fine-tuned for both of these brewing methods, but the clever is much more forgiving than the already forgiving Kalita when it comes to brewing a great cup of coffee. And that's why when people ask me, what should I get as my first home coffee brewer? I tell them the clever dripper. It's that simple. Anyway, that's been it. Thanks for stopping by. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're looking for more, and here's to wishing all of you and yours a beautiful, happy 2021. See you in the next one. My date